Every year, the streets of Cape Town erupt in a kaleidoscope of color, music, and dance. It's the Kaapse Klopse, the Minstrel Carnival. To the outside world, it's a parade, but to the people in these streets, it is a heartbeat. It is the sound of a culture that refused to be silenced, even when the world tried to define it out of existence. In the complex tapestry of Southern Africa, there is an identity that has often been relegated to the margins, sandwiched between the binaries of black and white. You've likely heard the sentiment, under apartheid we weren't white enough, under democracy we aren't black enough. But today, on Africa Revealed, we go beyond the in-between. We are not just talking about a biological mixed-race category, we are talking about the colored identity, a distinct, culturally rich and resilient ethnic group in its own right, from the shores of the Cape to the highlands of Namibia and the streets of Bulawayo. This is the story of a people who carry the world in their DNA and the history of a continent in their souls. In Southern Africa, the word coloured carries a weight, a history, and a pride that is often completely misunderstood by the rest of the world. To an observer from the West, this term might sound like a relic of a bygone, offensive era, a word wrapped in the sting of mid-century segregation. However, to understand the social fabric of the southern tip of our continent, one must first set aside external definitions.
You and I would be labeled as colored,
right? Because we're mixed.
Exactly. And so it's a strange world that we now lived in where, black and white equaled a completely new thing, which was colored.
In the Southern African context, colored is not a derogatory label imposed from the outside. It is a self-identified, legally recognized, and fiercely protected cultural identity. It is an ethnic designation that represents a distinct nation within a nation, possessing a heritage that is as specific and deep as any other on the globe. While many global cultures view race through a rigid binary lens of black and white, the history of Southern Africa has long been defined by the vibrant, complex spaces in between. This community is the heartbeat of a centuries-old lineage, a people born of the meeting between the indigenous Khoisan, enslaved souls brought from the East Indies, India and Madagascar, and European settlers. Over generations, these diverse breeds did not simply mix in a biological sense, they wove together to create an entirely new cultural entity. They forged a society with its own musical soul, found in the Hwama beats and the haunting harmonies of Cape Malay choirs, its own world-renowned cuisine, characterized by the aromatic spices of the bokap, and its own distinct linguistic evolution.
Groot trek when they left the Cape and they went up into the middle. They took the language with them and
En daar is hulle so mooi Afrikaans. Maar is niet 'n different version van dit, maar ons is geforce om so te praat in skole, the formal way.
It is critical for the global student of history to recognize that this identity is not a lack of race, nor is it a diluted version of other ethnicities. It is a complete and sovereign ethnic group. Throughout the tumultuous decades of the 20th century, the apartheid regime attempted to use this category as a mere administrative tool for division, a buffer within a systemic hierarchy. Yet the community transformed that intended tool of exclusion into a shield of resilience. They moved beyond the labels of the state to define themselves through shared experience and a common destiny. To be colored in Southern Africa is to belong to a heritage of survival. It is an identity that encompasses the bustling urban centers of Johannesburg, the historic cobbled streets of the Cape, and the vast, quiet stretches of the Northern Cape and Namibia. It is a testament to the fact that a people can emerge from the crossroads of global migration and colonial collision to form a unified, proud, and enduring culture. The genetic tapestry of the coloured community in Southern Africa is perhaps one of the most complex and fascinating human stories on the planet. To look at this community is to see a map of the world written in DNA, a biological record of global migration, the spice trade, and colonial encounter. It is a lineage that defies simple categorization, rooted in at least 4 different continents, yet belonging entirely to the soil of Africa. At the very heart of this tapestry are the Khoisan people, the San and the Khoikhoi. As the indigenous inhabitants of Southern Africa, their genetic markers are among the oldest in human history.
Archaeologists, historians, linguists, anthropologists, the lowest branch, in other words, the oldest branch, the oldest example of humanity, and that's where the Khoi belong.
They provided the first and most foundational thread of this identity. For many, this connection to the Khoisan is a point of profound ancestral pride, linking the modern community to the ancient rock art and the first languages of this land. But the tapestry was soon woven with threads from across the oceans. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the Dutch East India Company turned the Cape into a global transit point. With them came enslaved people from the shores of Madagascar, the coastlines of India, and the islands of the East Indies, modern-day Indonesia and Malaysia. These individuals brought with them a genetic and cultural richness that transformed the Cape. They were the artisans, the builders, and the scholars who infused the emerging colored identity with Eastern traditions, from architectural styles to the Islamic faith of the Cape Malays. Then there is the European thread. Sailors, soldiers, and settlers from the Netherlands, Germany, France, and later Great Britain arrived at the Cape. Their presence added a Western European layer to the genetic mix. However, unlike many other colonial encounters, this was not a fleeting interaction. Over centuries, these disparate groups lived, worked, and formed families in the shadow of Table Mountain and across the interior. Furthermore, the tapestry includes significant contributions from the Bantu-speaking peoples of Africa, such as the Xhosa and Zulu nations. As these groups moved southward and interacted with the emerging communities in the Cape and the eastern frontier, a further layer of African heritage was added to the mix. This genetic makeup is not merely a mixture, it is a fusion. It represents a unique evolutionary event where the DNA of the world's most ancient peoples met the DNA of the global East and West. To study this tapestry is to realize that there is no standard look or feature that defines the community. From the light-eyed individuals of the Northern Cape to the deep, resonant features of the Eastern Cape, the diversity is the identity itself. This biological reality serves as a living refutation of the rigid racial boxes the world so often tries to build. It is a powerful reminder that we are, in our very essence, a global family. The modern face of the coloured community is one of vibrant, multifaceted diversity that challenges any attempt at a narrow definition. To walk through the streets of contemporary Southern Africa is to witness a community that is as heterogeneous in its appearance as it is in its geography. There is no single look, no monolithic aesthetic. Instead, there is a sprawling spectrum of features, skin tones, and eye colors that reflect the global crossroads of their ancestry.
My name is Mila. I'm a color from Eden Park. We like connecting with people.
From the high-toned complexions found in the historic Bo-Kaap to the deep, resonant features of the Eastern Cape, the visual landscape of this identity is a living celebration of human variety. In the 21st century, this modern face is increasingly defined by a bold reclamation of heritage. We see it in the youth of the Cape Flats and the suburbs of Johannesburg, who are moving beyond the survivalist mindsets of previous generations to embrace a concept often termed brain pride. This isn't just about fashion or social media trends, it is a profound intellectual and cultural movement. Young artists, professionals, and activists are diving deep into their Khoisan roots, reviving indigenous naming traditions and spiritual practices that were once suppressed. They are asserting that their identity is a choice and a celebration, not a remnant of a colonial past.
Our culture is really represented, not the way that the Western people see us.
Yes.
Aware?
And also, we need to indicate the misconceptions versus the reality of things.
Yes.
Furthermore, the modern face is one of immense economic and professional contribution. From the corridors of corporate power in Sandton to the thriving fishing communities of the West Coast and the agricultural heartlands of the Northern Cape, the community is an integral engine of the regional economy. This is a people who have transitioned from being legally marginalized to being leaders in academia, medicine, and the arts. Ultimately, the modern face of the community is characterized by a refusal to be pigeonholed. Whether they are identifying as Cape Malay, Griqua, Basta, or simply as South African, they are moving with a renewed confidence. They are the entrepreneurs building new industries and the storytellers ensuring that the history of the forgotten middle is finally brought to light. This is a community that has looked the complexity of its past in the face and decided that its future will be defined on its own terms: proud, diverse, and unapologetically African. The Khoisan Foundation represents the most ancient and profound layer of the coloured identity, serving as the indigenous bedrock upon which all other history was built. Long before the first European sails appeared on the horizon or the first enslaved people were brought from the east, the San and the Khoikhoi, collectively known as the Khoisan, were the sovereign guardians of southern Africa. To understand the coloured people today is to recognize that they are the primary biological and cultural descendants of these First Nations. The San, primarily hunter-gatherers, and the Khoikhoi, nomadic pastoralists, possessed a deep spiritual connection to the land that is still reflected in the community's modern relationship with the Southern African landscape. Their influence is etched into the very geography of the region. Many of the place names we use today and the distinct click sounds that have migrated into languages like Xhosa and Zulu originated with them. This foundation is not merely a historical footnote, it is a living ancestry. For many in the coloured community, the reclamation of Khoisan identity has become a central pillar of their modern self-definition. They are looking back at the ancient rock art of the Cederberg and the linguistic heritage of the Nama and Griqua to find the keys to their future. However, the foundation also carries the weight of the first colonial encounter. As Dutch settlers expanded from the Cape, the Khoisan faced devastating displacement and the loss of their traditional grazing lands. This era of conflict and social upheaval led to the first instances of assimilation and the formation of the mixed communities that would later be categorized as coloured. Despite centuries of systemic attempts to erase this indigenous heritage, the Khoisan spirit endured. It lives on in the traditional knowledge of medicinal plants, the oral histories passed down through generations, and the resilient DNA that remains the most significant thread in the Southern African tapestry. The Cape slave trade is perhaps the most somber and often misunderstood chapter in the formation of the South African identity. To speak of this era with the revealed truth is to move beyond the sanitized versions of history that often describe this period through the lens of cultural exchange or intermarriage. We must be unflinching. The demographic reality of the Cape was built on a foundation of systemic exploitation and human bondage. Between the mid-17th and early 19th centuries, the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, transported thousands of people to the shores of the Cape in chains.
You had the slaves that worked for the Dutch East India Company, so they were not necessarily traded, but then you had slaves that were sold to the farmers.
This was a forced migration that turned a quiet coastal station into a crucible of global suffering and survival. These ancestors were not a monolith. They were a diverse array of souls brought from the shores of Madagascar, the coastlines of India, the Bay of Bengal, and the lush islands of the East Indies, modern-day Indonesia and Malaysia. They were craftsmen, scholars, political exiles, and laborers. They brought with them the Islamic faith, the intricate techniques of Eastern architecture, and a culinary palate that would eventually define the flavor of the Cape. But they arrived as property, stripped of their names and their freedom.
If you had a slave that was a blacksmith, you could hire him out and make money out of him. The slave didn't get anything, but the owner did. So they were regarded as property, and therefore you could do with your property as you pleased.
It is a critical truth of our history that the mixing of people at the Cape was frequently the result of the immense power imbalances inherent in a slave society. While some genuine unions certainly formed over time, we must acknowledge that for many enslaved women, there was no such thing as consent in the shadow of a master's authority. The early generations of what would become the coloured community were born into a world where their very existence was a byproduct of a colonial system that categorized human beings as assets. This is the raw, unvarnished reality. The beauty of the community's modern diversity emerged from a crucible of immense historical trauma. Yet, even within this system of absolute control, the enslaved people of the Cape demonstrated an incredible spirit of resistance and cultural preservation. They didn't just survive, they created. In the slave lodges and the kitchens of the Dutch settlers, they began to blend their diverse languages, Malay, Portuguese, Malagasy, and Dutch, to create a new means of communication. This wasn't just a language for work, it was a language of the soul, a way to build community in a world designed to break them. This era established the Cape Malay influence as a cornerstone of the broader coloured identity. It gave the community its intellectual depth and its unique spiritual character. To study the Cape slave trade is to honor the resilience of those who, despite being robbed of everything, managed to bequeath a rich, enduring legacy to their descendants. Their survival is the ultimate victory over the systems that sought to own them. The birth of the Afrikaans language is one of the most misunderstood and politically charged chapters in Southern African history. For much of the 20th century, a specific narrative was promoted that framed Afrikaans as a European language, born solely from the Dutch settlers of the Cape. But the revealed truth is far more complex and significantly more African. To understand the true origins of Afrikaans, one must look not at the official documents of the colonial development, but at the kitchens, the slave lodges, and the bustling docks of the 17th century Cape. Afrikaans was born as a language of necessity and survival, a slave Creole or kitchen Dutch. It emerged from the urgent need for a common tongue among a highly diverse population that had been forcibly brought together. Imagine the linguistic landscape of the early Cape: indigenous Khoisan people, Dutch soldiers and officials, and enslaved individuals from Madagascar, India, and the East Indies. Each group brought their own mother tongues, Khoi languages, Malayu, Portuguese, and Malagasy. In the daily grind of labor and domestic life, these languages began to collide and coalesce. The enslaved people and the Khoisan workers were the true architects of this new speech. They took the structure of 17th century Dutch and simplified it, stripping away complex European inflections and infusing it with the rhythms and vocabulary of their own ancestral lands.
It was through that interaction of people who had to communicate in order for them to survive was Afrikaans, a language that emerged from Africa for the people of Africa.
It was a language of the oppressed long before it was ever adopted by the elite. In fact, for nearly 2 centuries, the official language of the colony remained High Dutch, while the common people, the ancestors of today's coloured community, spoke this vibrant, evolving vernacular. Crucially, one of the earliest forms of Afrikaans was not in the Roman alphabet, but in Arabic script. Known as Arabic Afrikaans, these texts were created by the Cape Malay community to teach religious and educational concepts in the language their students actually spoke. This highlights a profound historical irony. The very language that would later be used as a tool of systemic exclusion was originally a tool of empowerment and literacy for the marginalized. By the time the language began to be formalized in the late 19th century, it had already been shaped by generations of colored speakers. Their influence is found in the very soul of the language, in its unique idioms, its expressive slang, and its poetic brevity. To speak Afrikaans today is to speak a language that carries the DNA of the global East, the Indigenous South, and the colonial West. For the modern colored community, reclaiming the history of Afrikaans is an act of cultural restoration. It is about acknowledging that this language is an indigenous African development. It belongs to the people who first whispered it in the kitchens of the Cape, who sang it in the streets of District 6, and who continue to evolve it today in the lyrics of hip-hop and the verses of modern poetry. Afrikaans is not just a medium of communication, it is a living monument to the linguistic genius of a people who turned a colonial encounter into a unique African expression. As the 18th century drew to a close, the social boundaries of the Cape Colony began to harden. For the emerging communities of mixed ancestry, those who were neither European nor enslaved, the Cape was becoming a place of increasing restriction and diminishing opportunity. It was in this crucible of frontier tension that one of the most remarkable stories of African sovereignty began. The rise of the Griqua people and their epic trek into the interior. The Griqua were a pioneer nation, a community primarily of Khoisan and European descent who refused to be subjects of the colonial crown. Led by visionary figures like Adam Kok I and Andries Waterboer, they were a people defined by their independence, their horsemanship, and their unique fusion of cultures. They spoke an early form of Afrikaans, practiced Christianity, and possessed a sophisticated understanding of both Western diplomacy and indigenous survival. By the early 1800s, realizing that their freedom was incompatible with the expanding reach of the British and Dutch authorities, they began a series of migrations, treks, that would take them across the formidable Orange River. This was not merely a move for better grazing land, it was a quest for a homeland. The Griqua established their own states, most notably Griqualand West and Griqualand East. They created their own constitutions, minted their own currency, and built thriving centers of trade and agriculture like Philippolis and Kokstad. For the student of history, the Griqua story is a powerful, revealed truth. It proves that the ancestors of today's colored community were not passive observers of history, but active nation builders who carved out sovereign territories in a volatile landscape.
In Kaapstad self het mense wat beweeg het langs die Weskus op en dan geleidelik soos 'n groot trek oorbeweeg het na Griquastad en daar die eerste Griqua nasie gevorm. Daarvandaan het hulle toe oorbeweeg in die 1800s na.
The Griqua trek was a feat of incredible endurance. Families moved their entire lives in ox wagons across the rugged Karoo, facing drought, conflict with other moving groups, and the constant threat of colonial annexation. Their journey was fueled by a distinct sense of identity, a belief that they were a new people with a right to self-determination. This era also saw the rise of the Bergenaars, factions of the community who chose a more nomadic, martial lifestyle in the mountains, further illustrating the internal diversity and resilience of the group. However, the discovery of diamonds in the late 19th century brought a tragic end to Griqua independence. The British Empire, driven by the hunger for mineral wealth, systematically annexed Griqua lands, leading to a period of dispossession that forced many into labor and poverty. Yet, despite the loss of their political sovereignty, the Griqua identity refused to die.
Die Griqua volk is 'n baie trotse volk. As jy hulle iets aangedoen het, hulle gaan jou nie weer pla.
Today, the legacy of the Griqua remains a cornerstone of the broader coloured experience. They are remembered as the pioneers of the North, a people who proved that identity is inextricably linked to the land. Their story is a testament to a spirit that values freedom above all else, a spirit that still resonates in the cultural festivals and the resilient communities of the Northern Cape and the Free State today. To understand the Griqua is to understand that the quest for dignity and a place to call home is the oldest thread in the Southern African tapestry. The mid-20th century marked a transition for the coloured community from a fluid historical identity into a rigid state-mandated category. In 1950, the apartheid government enacted the Population Registration Act, a piece of legislation that would fundamentally alter the social fabric of Southern Africa. This was the legal creation of race, a systematic attempt to manufacture clear-cut divisions where centuries of history had created a beautiful integrated complexity. Under this law, every citizen was required to be registered as white, native, or coloured. The state's definition of coloured was notoriously imprecise, described essentially as a person who was not a white person or a native. This residual legal definition ignored the rich specific ethnicities of the Cape Malay, the Griqua, or the various Khoisan descendant groups. Instead, it sought to create a monolithic administrative bloc. The primary goal of this legal manufacturing was not to honor heritage, but to implement a divide and rule strategy. By positioning the coloured community as a middle tier in a racial hierarchy, the regime aimed to create a buffer zone between the white minority and the black majority. This legal categorization was the engine behind the Group Areas Act, which dictated exactly where people could live, work, and own property based on their newly assigned label. For the first time, families who had lived in integrated neighborhoods for generations found themselves forcibly separated by law. The state began to map out the coloured townships, areas often located on the marginalized peripheries of major cities. This was a deliberate act of spatial engineering designed to break the communal bonds that had historically defined the Cape and other urban centres. It is a critical, revealed truth for any student of history that this legal identity was a tool of control. It was an attempt to strip away the sovereignty of self-definition and replace it with a stamp in a government passbook. However, the regime underestimated the resilience of the people they sought to categorize. While the law could dictate where a person lived or what label appeared on their identity card, it could not erase the centuries of shared culture, language, and kinship that truly defined the community. The legal creation of coloured as a state category was a moment of profound trauma, yet it also became a catalyst for a unified political consciousness that would eventually challenge the very foundations of the apartheid system. The era of arbitrary cruelty represents one of the most psychologically violent chapters in Southern African history.
Following the legal solidification of racial categories in 1950, the state faced a self-imposed dilemma: how to categorize a population that had, for 3 centuries, defied the very concept of pure racial lines. To solve this, the apartheid regime implemented a series of pseudo-scientific and deeply humiliating tests to determine who was white enough for privilege and who would be relegated to the colored category. This was the truth of a system that abandoned all logic in favor of a desperate, cruel obsession with physical appearance. At the center of this cruelty was the infamous pencil test. If a state official was unsure of a person's classification, they would stick a pencil into the person's hair and ask them to shake their head. If the pencil fell out, the individual might be classified as white. If it remained lodged in the curls, they were officially designated as colored or black. There was no medical basis, no genetic inquiry, and no appeal to family history. The trajectory of a human life, where they could live, whom they could marry, and what jobs they could hold, depended entirely on the texture of their hair in a single degrading moment. This arbitrariness extended to every physical feature. Officials would examine the color of a person's fingernails, the shape of their nose, or the pigment of the skin around their cuticles. They looked for telltale signs of non-white ancestry, often ignoring the reality that members of the same family could possess different physical traits. This led to the heartbreaking phenomenon of borderline cases, where siblings born to the same parents were given different racial classifications. One brother might be white and enjoy the full franchise of the state, while his sister was labeled colored and forced to move to a peripheral township. The cruelty was not merely in the tests themselves, but in the profound familial fracturing they caused. Families were torn apart as those who could pass for white were often forced to sever ties with their darker-skinned relatives to maintain their status. Parents were sometimes forced to walk on the opposite side of the street from their own children to avoid detection by the Race Classification Board. This created a culture of secrecy, shame, and a constant hovering fear of being reclassified. A neighbor's tip-off or a disgruntled colleague's report could trigger a re-evaluation, potentially stripping a family of their home and livelihoods overnight. For the student of social history, this period serves as a stark reminder of the absurdity of the color bar. It demonstrates how a government can weaponize the natural variation of human biology to serve a political agenda of division. The state attempted to turn the body itself into a witness for the prosecution. Yet this arbitrary cruelty also forged a unique resilience within the colored community. Having been poked, prodded, and categorized by a detached bureaucracy, the community developed a deep-seated skepticism of state-imposed identities. They learned that their true value and their true history could never be captured by a pencil or the shade of a fingernail. This era of humiliation ultimately failed to break the spirit of the people. Instead, it laid the groundwork for a generation of activists who would eventually demand a society where identity is defined by dignity, not by the arbitrary measurements of a colonial lens. The destruction of District 6 stands as the most visible and aching wound in the urban history of Southern Africa. To understand the revealed truth of this place, one must look past the empty wind-swept fields that remain today and envision a community that was the beating, cosmopolitan heart of Cape Town. For over a century, District 6 was a vibrant defiance of the very idea of segregation. It was a neighborhood where the diverse threads of the Southern African tapestry, Cape Malay, Xhosa, European, Indian and Jewish, lived not just side by side, but in a profound, integrated harmony. District 6 was defined by its human density and its cultural genius.
It was the birthplace of the Xhosa beat, the home of world-class jazz musicians and a center of intellectual and political fervor. Its steep, cobbled streets were lined with tailors, spice shops and cinemas. It was a place where the call to prayer from a minaret mingled with the ringing of church bells. For the ancestors of today's coloured community, District 6 was more than a residential area. It was an ancestral urban homeland, a symbol of what a truly integrated society could look like. However, the apartheid regime viewed this harmony as a threat to the legal creation of racial purity. In 1966, the government declared District 6 a white group area. The official justification was slum clearance, but the reality was a calculated act of ethnic cleansing. The state could not tolerate a thriving multiracial community in the shadow of Table Mountain. Between 1968 and the early 1980s, over 60,000 people were forcibly uprooted from their homes. The destruction was clinical and devastating. Bulldozers moved in, leveling decades of history, homes, shops and community centers into rubble. Families were loaded into government trucks and transported to the bleak, sandy peripheries of the Cape Flats, miles away from their places of work and their social networks. This was the spatial engineering of apartheid at its most cruel. It didn't just move people, it shattered the social capital of a nation. The displacement led to a profound sense of rootlessness and contributed to the social challenges that continue to affect the relocated communities today.
Now, I think one of the reasons was also because the area was very cosmopolitan. Many whites lived there. We had a lot of Jews in District 6. We had blacks, Indians, Hindus, Portuguese, Chinese, Japanese, you name it, all kinds of people. And we were like one big happy family. I think that was a problem. The apartheid government, they didn't like that because we proved to them it can work.
The truth of District 6 is that the state attempted to erase a culture by erasing its physical footprint. They sought to bury the memory of integrated living under layers of dust. Yet the spirit of District 6 refused to be silenced. It lived on in the stories told to children on the Cape Flats, in the music that continued to echo in the townships, and eventually in the creation of the District 6 Museum. Today, the vacant land remains a silent, powerful monument to the resilience of a people. It serves as a reminder that while buildings can be destroyed and families displaced, the heritage of belonging is a force that no bulldozer can ever truly flatten. District 6 remains the moral compass for a community that continues to demand the right to its city and its history. The psychological impact of the forgotten middle status and the systemic engineering of the apartheid era left a profound and complex mark on the collective psyche of the coloured community. To understand this truth, we must acknowledge the identity suspension that many individuals were forced to navigate, a state of being not white enough for privilege and not black enough for a clear, uncontested Indigenous status within the colonial framework. One of the most enduring psychological wounds was the internalized hierarchy created by the state's obsession with physical traits. The pencil test and other arbitrary measurements didn't just affect legal status, they infiltrated the home and the mirror. This led to a phenomenon of colorism within families, where lighter skin or straighter hair was often subconsciously associated with a higher chance of survival or success. The trauma of passing, where family members would disown their own kin to secure a better life, created a legacy of ancestral silence and shame that has taken generations to begin unraveling. Furthermore, the forced removals from ancestral urban homelands like District 6 and South End resulted in a condition sociologists call rootlessness or placelessness. When a community is uprooted from its social geography, the communal ego is shattered. The vibrant, integrated safety nets of the old neighborhoods were replaced by the bleak, often violent anonymity of the state-planned townships. This displacement wasn't just physical, it was a psychological assault that contributed to a lingering sense of cultural mourning, a grief for a way of life that was systematically stolen.
At least 60% of our population is under 30 years of age. They bear the mantle of those psychological scars embedded deeply in everything that we do and every living moment.
Yet, this crucible also forged a unique psychological resilience. Being excluded from both ends of the racial spectrum forced the community to develop a deep internal reliance and a sharp satirical wit, a gallows humor used as a shield against absurdity. This resilience is visible today in the bold reclamation of identity among the youth. They are moving from a psychology of survival to one of assertion, replacing the state-imposed labels with a self-defined Bruin Pride. Ultimately, the psychological story of the community is one of reintegration. It is the process of healing the fractures caused by the pencil and the bulldozer and embracing the complexity of their global African DNA as a source of strength rather than a cause for confusion. To recognize this impact is to honor the mental fortitude of a people who, despite being told they were a byproduct of history, have asserted that they are its most resilient architects. The story of the Rehoboth Bastards of Namibia represents one of the most distinct and sovereign expressions of the broader colored identity. To understand the truth of this community, one must look to the late 19th century, when a group of approximately 90 families, descendants of Kwekwe mothers and European fathers, chose to trek across the Orange River, seeking a land where they could live according to their own laws and traditions. This was not a flight of victims, but a migration of pioneers who sought to establish a republic of the soul. In 1870, they settled in the fertile lands of Rehoboth, an area they named for the biblical broad place where there is room to flourish. Here, they codified their own system of governance known as the Father-like Vete paternal laws. This wasn't just a set of rules, it was a declaration of independence. The Bastards established a captain system, an elected leadership that managed the affairs of the community, settled disputes, and negotiated with the powerful Nama and Herero nations that surrounded them. For the student of history, the Rehoboth Bastards are a primary example of indigenous sovereignty among people of mixed ancestry, a community that refused to be categorized by others and instead built a nation of their own. The term Basta itself carries a profound psychological weight. While the word originally had derogatory colonial origins, the people of Rehoboth reclaimed it with a sense of immense pride. To them, it signified their unique heritage and their hard-won independence. They were a people who balanced the traditions of the frontier, superb marksmanship, cattle farming, and a deep-seated Christian faith with a sophisticated understanding of Western law and diplomacy. However, their sovereignty was constantly under threat.
So when the German asked to fight with them against the other tribes, our captain, he withdrew the forces and brought them back to Rehoboth.
Throughout the 20th century, they faced the encroaching shadow of German colonial rule and later the South African administration under the apartheid mandate. The state's legal creation of racial categories attempted to strip the Bastards of their specific national identity, seeking to absorb them into a generic colored administrative bloc. Yet the community resisted. They fought to maintain their land rights and their father-like Vete, staging various forms of civil and even armed resistance to protect their ancestral territory.
The fact that government has denied the Rehoboth Bastard gemeente the right to practice its traditional and cultural beliefs by expropriating their land and other properties, such as the Kaptein Hermanus van Wyk gedenksaal, does have a negative effect on the Rehoboth Bastard culture and remains a concern that your administration needs to attend to as a matter of urgency.
The truth of the Rehoboth Bastards is their cultural tenacity. Despite decades of pressure to assimilate or disappear, they have maintained a distinct linguistic and social character. They speak a unique dialect of Afrikaans and continue to honor the traditions of their Trika ancestors. Today, the Rehoboth community remains a vital part of the Namibian tapestry. Their story is a testament to the frontier spirit that defines so much of the Southern African experience. It is a reminder that identity is not something granted by a state or a census form. It is something forged in the wilderness, defended with courage, and passed down through generations as a sacred legacy of freedom. To understand the Bastas is to recognize that the quest for a place to call one's own is the most powerful engine of human history. The expansion of the coloured identity into the northern territories of Zimbabwe and Zambia is a story of frontier ambition and the search for economic sovereignty. And to better understand, we must look at the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when the promise of mining and trade drew families away from the increasingly restrictive Cape Colony. These pioneers did not just move, they transplanted a culture into the heart of the southern African interior, creating vibrant communities in the Copperbelt and the bustling streets of Bulawayo and Salisbury, now Harare.
My father dealt very specifically with the African trade, and he learned to speak many of the African languages. For instance, Sindebele was the language spoken in Bulawayo.
In Zimbabwe, the community's roots are deeply intertwined with the early colonial frontier. Many families trace their heritage to Cape families who traveled north with the pioneer column or as independent traders. In cities like Bulawayo, a distinct Rhodesian Coloured identity emerged, a community that was urban, highly skilled and culturally sophisticated. They built their own social clubs, schools and sports leagues, creating a cohesive middle-tier society that was separate from both the white elite and the indigenous majority. This was a survival strategy in a deeply segregated land, but it also fostered a unique sense of pride and kinship that remains today. Crossing the Zambezi into Zambia, formerly Northern Rhodesia, the narrative shifts toward the Euro-African heritage. Here, the community grew significantly around the booming mining industry of the Copperbelt. Unlike the more rigid social structures of the South, the Zambian experience was often characterized by a different kind of integration. In towns like Ndola and Kitwe, mixed-race families were central to the administrative and technical life of the mines. They were the bridge builders of the economy, navigating a linguistic and social landscape that required them to be fluent in both European and African ways of life. The history of these northern communities is their incredible adaptability. They were not merely remnants of a southern migration, they became indigenous to their new homes. In Zimbabwe and Zambia, the coloured identity is marked by a unique linguistic blend where Afrikaans loanwords meet Shona, Ndebele or Bemba. While many faced the trauma of being caught in the crossfire of liberation struggles and political shifts, their contribution to the infrastructure and soul of these nations is undeniable. To study the northern frontier is to recognize that the coloured identity is not confined by the borders of the Cape. It is a transnational African phenomenon, defined by a spirit of enterprise and a stubborn refusal to be erased from the map of the continent. In the landlocked heart of southern Africa, the narrative shifts toward the highland and desert landscapes of Lesotho and Botswana. Here, the identity followed a different trajectory, defined by deep social integration into sovereign African nations while maintaining unbreakable kinship ties across the South African border. In the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, the story is one of geographic intimacy. Surrounded entirely by South Africa, the families of Maseru and the border towns have lived in a state of constant cultural exchange. Because the Free State, with its deep-rooted communities in places like Bloemfontein, is just across the Caledon River, the identity here is defined by a fluid bilingualism. Many families identify strongly as Basotho, speaking fluent Sesotho and adhering to traditional customs, yet they preserve the linguistic markers of their Cape and Griqua ancestry. This integration allowed families to navigate the harsh racial laws of the surrounding republic while finding a sovereign sanctuary in the mountains. In these highlands, being colored was less about a state-imposed category and more about a family history woven into the national Basotho fabric. To the west, the arid landscapes of Botswana offered a path of desert integration. Here, the mixed-race community often traces its origins to the early traders, blacksmiths, and transport riders who traveled the missionaries' road into the interior. In towns like Gaborone, Lobatse, and the remote Ganzi district, these families didn't just settle, they became integral threads in the Tswana tribal structure. Unlike the structured segregation of the South, Botswana's history allowed for a more organic social blending. Many prominent Botswana families today carry these mixed lineages, serving as leaders in business and governance. They are Tswana first, yet they honor a distinct heritage that links them to the Northern Cape and the Kalahari. What connects these two distinct regions is the enduring power of kinship. For these communities, the border has always been a political construct rather than a human one. Throughout the 20th century, the border posts served as arteries of connection. Families in Gaborone and Maseru remained tethered to their cousins in Johannesburg or Cape Town through a constant cycle of weddings, funerals, and shared holidays. This cross-border identity meant that even as they built sovereign lives in independent nations, they remained emotionally and culturally invested in the struggles of their kin across the line.
Moving toward the eastern coast of the subcontinent, the story takes on a different linguistic and cultural rhythm within the green hills of KwaZulu-Natal. Here, the identity of the Zulu Colored community challenges the traditional Western Cape-centric view of what it means to be colored, showcasing a profound linguistic fluidity that is unique to the region. In KwaZulu-Natal, the heritage is often rooted in the 19th century interactions between British settlers, traders, and the powerful Zulu nation. Families in areas like Wentworth and Durban, or the rural stretches of Zululand, grew up in a world where the boundaries of identity were negotiated through the deep poetic cadences of IsiZulu. For many in this community, IsiZulu is not just a second language, it is their mother tongue. This linguistic reality creates a fascinating cultural intersection. Individuals who identify politically and socially as colored, yet navigate their daily lives, prayers, and family traditions entirely through the Zulu language. This regional identity was often forged in the mission stations and the early trading outposts, where European, Saint Helenian, and Mauritian influences met Zulu culture. Over generations, this resulted in a community that is physically and culturally mixed, but deeply anchored in the indigenous traditions of the East Coast. During the apartheid years, this group faced a particular kind of displacement. The state's rigid racial categories struggled to account for people who looked colored but spoke the language of the majority, leading to a sense of being doubly marginalized. Yet this fluidity is precisely where the community's strength lies.
I'm a mixture of Zulu and colored. Of course you'll be confused about which language I speak. I'm a mixture of Zulu and colored. Of course I can hear almost all the languages.
The Zulu colored identity is a testament to the fact that culture is not a static set of rules, but a living, breathing adaptation.
In KZN, you might find a family gathering where the Sunday roast is served alongside traditional Zulu fare and where the conversation shifts effortlessly between English and IsiZulu. This is not a sign of confusion, but of a sophisticated biculturalism. In KwaZulu-Natal, the identity is defined by the ability to hold two worlds at once, the ancestral heritage of the global traveler and the deep-rooted pulse of the Zulu heartland. It is a common and painful myth that the colored community sat on the sidelines of history, acting merely as a passive buffer between the white minority and the black majority. The truth is far more courageous. From the very inception of the struggle against apartheid, men and women from this community were at the front lines, risking everything to dismantle a system that sought to categorize and control them. Consider the life of Dulcie September. Born in Athlone, she was a teacher who turned her back on a quiet life to become a revolutionary. Her journey took her from the Cape to the corridors of international diplomacy in Paris, where she served as the ANC's chief representative. She was a woman who spoke truth to power with such clarity and force that she was eventually assassinated in 1988. Her sacrifice is a stark reminder that the fight for freedom knew no racial boundaries. It was a human struggle, fueled by an unwavering belief in justice. In the 1980s, this spirit of resistance found its collective voice through the United Democratic Front, or the UDF. When the regime attempted to co-opt the community with the Tricameral Parliament, a hollow gesture of political inclusion, the response from the Cape Flats and beyond was a resounding no. The UDF became the heartbeat of internal resistance, and its leadership was filled with colored activists, clerics, and students who organized boycotts, strikes, and mass protests. They didn't want a seat at a segregated table, they wanted a new table altogether. These fighters were the architects of a non-racial future. They faced detentions without trial, police brutality, and the constant threat of disappearance, yet they refused to be silent. By reclaiming this history, we honor the fact that the liberation of South Africa was not the work of one group alone. It was a symphony of defiance in which the colored community played a lead and often dangerous part. They were not proxies of the state, they were the foot soldiers of democracy. Their legacy is etched into the very soil of this nation, proving that the identity born of the Cape is, above all else, an identity of profound, revolutionary resilience. For many on the Cape Flats and in townships across southern Africa, the transition from apartheid to democracy has not brought the economic redress they envisioned. Instead, a pervasive sentiment has taken root, the feeling that they were not white enough for privilege under the old regime and are now not black enough for opportunity under the new. This grievance is most visible in the modern job market. While broad-based Black Economic Empowerment, BBBE, was designed to correct the systemic exclusions of the past, many in the colored community feel the implementation has created a new set of barriers. In the competitive landscape of South African employment, there is a growing frustration that their specific history of marginalization is being overlooked. Skilled workers, graduates, and artisans often find themselves in a statistical limbo where their ethnic classification doesn't always align with the primary beneficiaries of transformation policies. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the dignity of work and the ability to provide for a family in an economy with soaring unemployment. The psychological weight of this economic exclusion is immense. It fuels a sense of disillusionment with the political process, leading to a breakdown in the social contract.
When youth in Wentworth or Eldos look at the glittering skyscrapers of Sandton or the tech hubs of Cape Town, they often see a world that remains out of reach. They see the buffer status of the past being replaced by a modern marginalization where their unique cultural identity is celebrated during election cycles but ignored during budget allocations. Yet this grievance is also a catalyst for a new kind of activism. It is driving a demand for true inclusivity, one that recognizes the nuanced layers of disadvantage and honors the diversity within the Black political category.
As the golden light of the Cape sunset fades into the twilight of the Atlantic, we are left with a powerful realization. The story of the Coloured identity is not a footnote in Southern African history. It is a central, vibrant and resilient chapter of the human experience. From the high-altitude sanctuaries of Lesotho to the industrial heart of the Zambian Copperbelt, this community has proven that identity is not a static category defined by a state, but a living spirit nurtured by family, language, and an unyielding will to belong. This journey across borders and generations shows us that being coloured is an abundance of heritage, a tapestry woven from the threads of the entire world and anchored in the soil of Africa. But this story doesn't end with this documentary. It continues with you. We want to hear your voice. Are you from one of the communities we've explored today? Do you have a family story from the northern frontier or a memory of the pencil test that needs to be told? Perhaps you are part of the new generation redefining what it means to be a brain African today. Please share your heritage, your corrections, and your pride in the comments below. Your stories are the primary sources that keep the Africa Revealed community alive and authentic. If this journey moved you or taught you something new about the soul of our subcontinent, hit the like button and subscribe to Africa Revealed. Share this video with someone who needs to see the strength of our collective history. Together, we will continue to uncover the untold stories of this magnificent continent. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.